Buakaw switch kick is arguably the best in kickboxing history. Thrown with such finesse, precision and power, his opponents often have no answers against it. Even against monsters across 2 decades, Buakaw switch kicks completely destroyed him. You see, when peak mastery is achieved with a technique, it doesn't matter if the opponent knows it's coming. It cannot be defended. This then enables a strategy called spamming. In all seriousness, it is easy to mistake this as just raw power. Many pundits say that Buakaw is just powerful, that he is not a technician. But his moments fighting and sparring with Sanchai prove that wrong. Yes, Buakaw is bigger, but Sanchai wouldn't have said that Buakaw is the best if he was not also a technician. In fact, in a heartfelt moment after the fight, Sanchai said Buakaw's technique is what won him the fight. So let's honour Sanchai's perspective and take a look at the best technique in Buakaw's arsenal. This is the technique that originally took Buakaw into superstardom early in his career. Fight fans, welcome back to another episode of Lawrence Kenshin Striking Breakdowns. In this episode, we break down one of Buakaw Biomechanics' most famous techniques, the switch kick. Welcome to the most comprehensive breakdown of Buakaw's switch kick on the internet. Before we go deep on Buakaw's legendary switch kick, we need to understand Buakaw's style. Buakaw's style is what many would call hybrid Muay Thai. Now, what is hybrid Muay Thai? It's a style that utilizes all of the Muay Thai arsenal of kicks and knees, but integrated with boxing that allows the fighter to effectively compete in kickboxing. That means Buakaw is a triple threat when facing kickboxers. To understand Buakaw's hybrid Muay Thai, we must look at his stance and footwork. You see, he has a much more squared stance compared to his kickboxing counterparts. Buakaw's Muay Thai footwork is not like his flashy kickboxing counterparts. As demonstrated by Chang Puek Yatsonrit, the Muay Thai fighter who changed history by fighting the best American kickboxer, we saw that slow plodding and stable footwork often defeats active and fancy footwork. After all, kickboxers require a more bladed stance for quick in and out footwork, spin attacks, and a heavier base for boxing. This allows the kickboxers to jab and side kick better. However, with Buakaw's squared stance, he controls the center line with the push kick. As with anything, there are significant advantages and disadvantages of this, but with his legendary fundamentals and unmatched power, Buakaw's advantages shine through with his lead-sided attacks. Buakaw's lead side.
He kicks underneath the jab, goes to the ribcage again. Teeth kick to the midsection.
In this round, the whole fight can be decided here in 3 minutes. So they
Being a left-sided dominant fighter, it is important to know that these are his most reliable and damaging weapons during the early stages of his career. Accompanied with high fight IQ, being able to read and control attacks, Buakaw masterfully uses these techniques to control the distance and rhythm. The best fight to showcase how much control he had was Buakaw versus Masato. Buakaw destroying Masato showcased how Muay Thai kicks shut down even the best puncher during the golden era of Japanese kickboxing. Now without any further ado, let's deep dive into Buakaw's legendary switch kick. Even though a switch kick is considered one technique, the variations are endless. A fighter who has mastered striking knows how to apply each variation depending on the scenario. A legendary fighter knows how to apply the technique in each scenario ruthlessly. To understand each variation, we must know what the targets are first. You see, Buakaw will target different body parts depending on the range, the style of the opponent, and the specific context in the fight. As many of his opponents were heavy punchers, these kickboxers were brutally shut down by the switch kicks to the forearms, shoulders, and head. With a higher target such as the shoulder and head, this makes it more difficult for the opponent to attempt to catch and counter the attack. Not only did many lack the ability to read the kick coming, but they rarely block with their legs, which uses the strong shin bone to effectively absorb the most effective Muay Thai technique. Not only did heavy kicks to the arms completely shut down their boxing game, it also gives the opponent what is called a dead arm, which makes them lose the ability to block shots to the head. Sam Gore showed this against one of the best Japanese fighters in history.
เป็นมวยหมัดเราถ้าเขาเป็นมวยหมัดดีของเราติดลำตัวติดแขนเอาเนี่ยตามติดเอาติดลำแขนติดเขาไม่บังอยู่แล้วเตะ2 ที 3 ทีเวลาเขาจิบเขาจะไม่ต่อย2เตะเบิ้ลบังนี่เบิ้ลอีกบังจนเตะจนช้ำจนยกแขนมันขึ้นยกบังไม่ได้ก็
Here are all the targets for the switch kick: forearms and shoulder, the head, the liver and body, the armpit, the back leg. Specifically against the straight punches, such as a jab or cross, Buakaw would target the open body, allowing him to slam his shins brutally into the opponent's liver or high ribs, where it is the least conditioned. Switch variations. To understand switch kicks, we must understand what the different switches are. You see, Buakaw utilized many different switch variations throughout the entirety of his career. We must understand the context when each switch is applied. This all depends on where the focus was. Speed, timing on counters and entries, disguising the switch, covering distance, or to just score and dominate with power. The classic switch kick. Everybody knows the classic switch, but there are still a few variations that varies from fighter to fighter. You see, Buakaw tries to slide into his switch as much as possible. This way, his switch can mostly go undetected. Compared to actually jumping and switching into the kick, this has much less upper body movement. As Buakaw switches, he will land in a pre-pivot, with the toes facing outward, angling off of the center line. This creates a pre-torque of the hips, already generating momentum for the roundhouse. He can do this with a full pre-pivot, or at the last minute of the kick, pivoting the base leg, turning the hips and core over. With bigger switches, he can generate much more power and cover additional distance.
世界を取った右の拳。
Disguising the switch. With disguising his switch inside his footwork, this makes the switch incredibly hard to read and therefore unpredictable. Buakaw is even able to do this both going backwards and forwards.
Nice kick from Buakaw, sharp.
นิดนึงครับพูดถึงความรัดกุมนั้นบัวขาวรัดกุมนะครับระบบการป้องกันตัวการทิ้งจังหวะออกอาวุธในนาทีนี้ถือว่าทำได้ดีเอาครับ
Buakaw can also be crafty and land into southpaw for his left kick. He can masterfully do this with any of his lead side weapons, such as the teep and knee. Even during the heat of a combination, he will use this tactic to conceal the switch. Pump switch. This variation is by far the quickest of all the switches. Having the least telegraph time of all the switch kicks, this quick pump is used for perfectly timing the opponent's charging entries. If the kicker can produce enough power with the quick pump, it is extremely hard to read and prepare for. As you can see, all Buakaw needs to do is quickly throw his lead leg back and fire a quick roundhouse to stop his opponent. With pumping the lead leg backwards slightly into neutral or just past neutral stance, Buakaw shifts his body weight back with a slight lean as the roundhouse drives, accompanied with the arm swing generating extra momentum. Buakaw, being the powerhouse that he is, generates more than enough to shock the opponent to deter any forward momentum. The pendulum and short rear step. These two steps, although very similar, are applied very differently. When Buakaw throws the left kick with a pendulum step, he is usually at a longer range or wanting to cover more range to attack the opponent's rear leg. The shifting of the rear leg carries enough momentum through the lead leg to simultaneously shift the body forward and drive the lead leg into the target. When executed quickly, this step is less detectable, closing range quickly but still carrying enough power and momentum for follow-up attacks. The other variation is when Buakaw shifts the rear leg into neutral stance. This variation, although technically slower, is also still hard to detect. With closing to a narrower stance, incorporating the same lean and arm swing, Buakaw is in range and generates more power through the lead leg. Oftentimes, with this variation, Buakaw will tend to aim for the body and head. Buakaw is so quick with this that he can even land it while the opponent attacks to sweep or off balance them. The rear leg step will also go both ways. That is, Buakaw will step back with his rear leg, widening his stance and leaning back while carrying the momentum into his lead roundhouse as the opponent attacks. Full step into southpaw. This variation is excellent for covering the longest range and generating the most power. To pull this technique off properly, it's important to mask the step with another technique, as simply rushing in can be too risky. To set up the full step, Buakaw will usually throw a feint or combination, such as a jab and cross. This not only distracts the opponent, but also restricts their vision. He can also use the cross or the hook and carry the forward momentum to propel Buakaw forward into the southpaw stance. It is important to note that Buakaw often steps off the center line, shutting down potential counters, while also improving the power of the roundhouse. The exception is when Buakaw is attacking the rear leg of the opponent. When he does this, Buakaw will step in at a more straight angle. Mechanics of a switch kick. To understand the switch kicks, we must also understand the biomechanics of the technique. When Buakaw executes the switch kick, he is usually rear leg heavy and light on the lead leg. This is obvious as one simply observes his stance and posture. The rear leg, acting as the primary base, usually sits right below his body. This in turn makes his lead leg lighter, giving Buakaw the ability to raise his lead leg for feints, teeps, and kicks much easier. Once Buakaw has switched, the rear leg does not stay heavily planted on the ground. Instead, the foot will act as a spring, dropping down slightly, bending the knee to spring back up into the kick. The knee drive is utilized by many legendary fighters. Sanchai and Ladzilla are only a few to mention. When a skilled kicker can masterfully isolate the knee drive, they can finish the opponent ruthlessly. You see, a good knee drive makes the kick extremely hard to read. With good control of the knee drive, it's possible to change the trajectory of the shin and therefore the technique itself. From a narrower stance, it is just mechanically more sound to use the knee drive with a lean back. The traditional Muay Thai roundhouse does not require this lean back. Unlike the knee drive variation, Buakaw sometimes will use the more traditional Muay Thai style roundhouse. This variation drives the leg up with a slight bend, generating power through a larger kicking arc. This kick aims to not simply hit the target, but has the intent to smash through it. The cue of smashing through helps turn the whole body over, amplifying the damage done by driving the shin into the target. Whether it's the traditional Muay Thai roundhouse or the knee drive focused roundhouse, we need to explore the landing. Upon landing, you will see that Buakaw has a stable and high posture with the hip and core at full extension. Throughout all of this, he never takes his eye off the opponent. The arm swing is the most misunderstood part of the Muay Thai roundhouse. Understanding it will amplify the power of the kick. The arm swing both acts as a counterbalance for the kick, as well as defense against punches. In some cases, Buakaw can even use an arm swing to assist his sweeps. First, Buakaw initiates the switch kick by throwing his arm swing across his face. This rotates the shoulder inward to then swing either across his body or down to his side. The quality of the arm swing dictates the momentum that can be generated on the legs for the kick. Buakaw's arms potentiate the rotational torque by acting as a coil. As he throws the kick, the right arm swings downward by his side as the left arm raises for protection, while adding additional power. If the arm swings high, it's for defending an opponent's punches. In this variation, Buakaw will swing his arm straight. Buakaw's defense. Even if you have the best switch kick in the world, you still need to have good defense after throwing it. After all, a good switch kick encourages the puncher to throw harder each time he gets shut down. In order to remain untouchable, Buakaw will employ a few key defensive tactics. Oftentimes, when still in the punching range, Buakaw will utilize a shell guard or his famous long guard. With high shoulders and dropping of the chin, the long guard can block punches while maintaining the long range. When Buakaw has clear vision of what the opponent will do, he will evade the shots with ducks and leanbacks. If the opponent fires kicks as the counter, Buakaw will know not to retract his kick fully, either pulling into a check or a teep. To avoid having the kick being caught, Buakaw will specifically target certain zones. For example, to avoid catches, Buakaw will target the forearms and shoulder, making it extremely difficult for the opponent to catch. Only when the opponent is clearly open, as they enter range with attacks, will Buakaw throw shots to the liver and ribs. If the opponent does manage to catch the kick, Buakaw can quickly escape by turning his knee up, and retracting and driving his leg back into stance. Setups. In order to execute the switch kick, Buakaw must ensure it lands. That means he must be in the correct range and ensure that the weapon is able to effectively land. As established earlier, Buakaw tends to fight off his lead side threats. With these threats, he is able to range find, distract, move, and land his chosen weapons. Pairing the jab and the teep with the switch kick is a concept in Muay Thai called the triple threat. Doing this well allowed Buakaw to completely shut down the legendary Nihi hold skin. By jabbing throughout the fight, Buakaw is able to use this threat for many purposes. If the jab lands, Buakaw knows he is in range to fire his power punches or power roundhouses. Oftentimes, he will look to blind the opponent with the jabs. The jab will also serve as his rangefinder for the roundhouse, all the while disguising the timing of the switch. Buakaw's teeps are legendary and serve many purposes, including the setup of his legendary switch kick. Think of the lead teep as Muay Thai's jab and the roundhouse as Muay Thai's checking left hook. If the teep is constantly landing, then it creates opportunities for the switch kick to land. The teep breaks the opponent's posture and gets them to be more concentrated on their linear attack. It gets them to turn aggressive, but then the switch kick meets that aggression. In this way, the switch kick is often used as the equivalent of boxing's check hook. Offensively, if the opponent's posture is broken by the teep, they will find it very difficult to block or defend the switch kick. The long guard is probably Buakaw's favourite and most used defensive technique. By employing the long guard in closer ranges, with the lead arm touching the opponent, he knows that his switch kicks can land. Not only is this a good defensive technique, it also perfectly sets up his switch kick. The long guard can also be utilised for pushing, and Buakaw often loves to push. This pushing allows him to keep landing his roundhouses, continuously firing his switch kicks if he wants to. There you have it. This is the most comprehensive guide on how Buakaw uses his switch kicks to dominate his opponents. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Striking Breakdowns. I'm Lawrence Kenshin, and thank you for keeping our channel alive. To learn directly from these legends, check out the legendary striking courses on my website.